Welcome to HortTube, where we talk all things gardening. My name is Jim Putnam, and this is a winter star camellia. This is winter star camellia, a fall flowering evergreen shrub with lustrous green foliage. Winter star, like most camellias, will end up over 10 feet tall in time and probably as much as 6 feet wide if you just left it alone for a very, very long period of time. It's really easy to keep these in probably a 5 to 7 foot range. Winter star is more cold hardy than many other varieties of camellias and will actually grow in zone 6, where most camellias will not grow and last in the winter time. Probably in the top of zone 6 and 6A, you definitely would want to use this on a foundation or in a protected space, because it probably could be severely hurt in a really cold winter. But it's nice to have an option of actually being able to grow a camellia in zone 6, and then they'll grow all the way down to zone 10. Winter star, like most camellias, will be slow growing in the ground. We probably only get 8 inches a year, even in a nursery setting. You'd be very lucky to get 4 or 5 inches in the ground, which makes it a great plant because it will outgrow pretty much any space it's in, and that makes it a very slow process of outgrowing it. Like most camellias, winter star would prefer to be in some shade. It's a shade-loving evergreen shrub. I would say a half a day sun or less. It would not want to sit in full sun 5 or 6 hours of the midday during the summertime. It definitely would not be beneficial to this plant to be in that situation. Typically, we're going to use these where they're going to get afternoon sun, maybe after 2 in the afternoon, or a lot of early sun during the day, maybe up until about 1 or 2. Because of its size, winter star, although it's a fantastic evergreen shrub, would not really work well on a foundation under windows, but it would work very well in a corner, and it could actually be tree formed. You can limb these up from the bottom over time and actually plant other things around the base of them and create a small tree, or keep it as a smaller 6-foot shrub. But really the best place for these is probably in a corner or somewhere tucked on the edge of your property, where they can really be allowed to get big and tall. And then they're evergreen all season, and then they come out super showy in the fall and early winter. Winter star gets lots and lots of pinkish lavender flowers in the mid to late fall and into the early winter. This is an absolute fantastic flowering shrub. It flowers when almost nothing else in your yard will be flowering. That's what I love about camellias. If you're in the green business, it's about the only time of year we are slow and have some time to enjoy our own yards. So it tends to be a favorite of nurserymen and landscapers as well. You can see how loaded with buds this one is. We want to make sure we don't do a lot of pruning on these after midsummer, because these buds have already started to form at that time. But right now it's early November in North Carolina, and you can see this thing's going to be blooming for a while. Camellias are acid-loving plants, and they're pretty adaptable to most soils in the southeast United States. We usually just don't have a problem with these. If you have heavy clay soils, you definitely want to mound this plant up and create some additional drainage in the hole. And we'll do that by digging the hole the depth of the root ball and maybe twice the width of the root ball. And then whatever soil you pulled out of that hole, if it's heavy clay, we'll mix some pine bark soil conditioner in. It's actually what we're growing these in. It drains really well. We'll use about half pine bark soil conditioner and half the clay. And we'll put some of that soil mix back in the bottom of the hole, so that when this comes out of the container, goes into the ground, they'll actually sit up about 2 inches above the original grade. Pull the rest of the soil up to the edge of that, tamp it down, water it in, and then lightly mulch this plant. Camellias are not plants that like to sit and drown in mulch. You want to have it fade out before it reaches the base of this plant. It's very important. The best camellias, I live in North Carolina, and the best camellias in North Carolina are ones on old abandoned farmhouses. They haven't been mulched in forever, and they've kind of been neglected. I mean, this is a plant that you want to kind of plant and fertilize and prune and give some general maintenance to, but it's not a plant that needs to be babied. If you live in a coastal area, you might want to add some compost or cow manure or peat moss to the sand when you plant it, and that will hold a little bit of water in place between rains. After the first year, you're not going to have to do a lot of watering on your camellia if you live in an area that gets kind of normal rainfall. That first year, though, you will want to check on it occasionally. Put your finger down in the hole, maybe 2 or 3 inches, and see if it actually needs it. And if it does, saturate the entire space around the plant. Don't just water right at the base of it. We want to encourage the roots to go out into the surrounding soil. When you initially plant it and you pull this out of the container, Typically, camellias aren't root bound. They're actually very hard to get to root in a container, but if it does have roots wrapped around one another and it's been in that container for a long time, do pull at those a little bit so that they'll go outward instead of continuing to wrap around one another. Camellias are acid-loving plants, so any fertilizer for acid-loving plants is perfect for these. Anything that says azalea, camellia, rhododendron fertilizer, you'll see that frequently in whatever garden center you go to. That's going to be the perfect fertilizer for this plant. And do it in the mid-spring, after the worst of the winter has passed for you. That's all we want to fertilize these. Do not fertilize them in the summertime, because if we put additional growth on them in the late summer, it'll end up being damaged in the following winter. In terms of pruning your camellias, they won't need it very often. Like I said, they're very slow growing. Once it gets above the height you want to keep it, and it almost certainly will at some point, you can actually get after these pretty hard. If they're well established in the ground, you can probably take 2 or 3 feet out of these in a single pruning without any problem. So if it's 7 or 8 feet tall and you want to keep it, 5 feet, you can come down to probably 4 feet pretty easily. If it's been in the ground for a few years, they're pretty tolerant of that. The only time you can really prune this plant is in the early to mid-spring. It starts setting the flower buds in the summer, which swell up and then start opening in the fall. So if you pruned it any time after midsummer, you'd definitely be costing yourself flowers. In terms of insect or disease problems, camellias definitely get scale. It's one of those things that almost all camellias will have at some point. It's usually down in the bottom of the plant on the oldest growth. Sometimes we'll even get them along the wood at the very bottom of the plant where it enters the ground. Not a lot of damage is really taken from this, and you're not really ever going to see it typically up here on these upper leaves on top of the plant. So I just typically don't worry about it in the nursery. Obviously we have to spray for it because we don't want to send plants out that have insects on them. And if you plant a lot of them together, it tends to be worse. They're able just to move from one plant to the next. But like I say, I don't worry about it in the yard. It's not something I think you're going to have a big problem with, especially if there's any air movement around the plant. We'll get a little leaf spotting on these. It's pretty typical if the leaves stay wet for a long time, especially happens in a nursery. So if you're buying one of these and you see some spots on the leaves, it's just not that big of a deal. It's where it was overhead irrigated and water stayed on the leaves for a long period of time while it was being grown, and not a lot that can be done about that, and it just doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to hurt the plant anyway. Deer will eat your camellias. They like them about as much as we do, and so if you have deer issues, you either want to put these, use them as foundation plants, or they just might not be for you. So what are you waiting for? Even you can grow the low maintenance, fall flowering, winter star camellia. If this video was helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Also, comment below with any questions you have about camellias. Thank you.